This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. It is currently the 7th of July, 2010, and tonight I am joined on the line once again by Charlie Veitch of the Love Police at cveitch.org. Charlie, great to have you back on the program. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks, James. It's good to be back on the show, especially with a Canadian. And I know we spoke just before I went out to Toronto, and it was my first time ever in Canada, so it seems quite fitting that my first YouTube appearance back is with a Canadian, so let's do this.
Well, I'm honored to have you on again, and as I'm sure most of my listeners and viewers are aware by now, that you had a very interesting experience in Toronto for the G20, so I don't know really where to start with all of this, but why don't you start and pick it up wherever you want and just tell people a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, well, I'll start at the ending. With the ending ended with me on the 1st of July, 2 days after my scheduled departure date. My girlfriend managed to book me a last-minute Air India flight leaving Toronto Airport. So there I found myself walking around the duty-free area of Toronto International Pearson Airport, looking out for police, looking out for security, trying to hide, trying to cover my face, not listening to music in case someone crept up on me, because I was so scared that the Toronto Police Department would handcuff me and drag me away just as I was about to board this last flight. It's a really strange feeling being in a Western industrialized, civilized country and feeling like the Gestapo are out to get you, and that's precisely how I felt. My trip began 3 days before the G20 was due to begin. I arrived in Toronto on the 23rd at 3 p.m., and then at 3 p.m. on the 24th, I was in handcuffs for 5 hours, and then in the Torontonomo Bay, the big detention center at the film studios, in a big metal cage for 21 hours. So my experience of the New World Order paramilitary black-booted stormtroopers was very direct, very intimate, very personal. And if I ever did think that around the world in other industrialized Commonwealth countries the police were huggable and approachable and friendly and actually human beings, I was proven sadly very wrong. So out of my 7 days in Canada, I spent 48 hours in incarceration, most of them with my hands handcuffed. And being paraded before a judge, having lawyers come to see me, sharing a cell with wife beaters and crack addicts and people who've assaulted other people pouring with blood. I picked up a nasty cold, and who knows what else I picked up in jail. Luckily, I wasn't raped, only psychologically by the system. So luckily, James, it hasn't clouded my impression of Canada or Canadians. I know the issues you guys have with the kind of stormtrooper police acting like the biggest gang in town, which is what they are. They're a corporate revenue collection mafia, is a problem we have with any country which is part of the G20 industrialized, so supposed civilized countries. So now I find myself in London faced with 2 court appearances in Toronto on the 15th of July, which is in 8 days, and on the 23rd of August. So what a wonderful way to start the summer months.
Yes, wonderful indeed. And the original arrest, obviously, because of the heinous and egregious sin of not presenting your papers when demanded, even though, as it turns out, you weren't actually required by law to present your papers, despite the lies of the Toronto police chief. And all of that rigmarole, which I'm sure people have been looking into, but if not, they can definitely check some of that out in my Sunday updates and Dan Dix at pressfortruth.ca and all sorts of things. So absolutely. Well, let's. I don't want to just dwell on the incarceration, although that obviously is a huge part of what happened. But talk a little bit about your experience there and meeting Dan Dix and some of the things that you were involved in that wasn't so horribly depressing.
Yeah. It's quite funny. Dan Dix lives right by the CN Tower in central Toronto. He lives literally a stone's throw away from the G20 security fence. We found it both very interesting that you can see on the video we're trying to reason with the sergeant who had one of those, kind of US Marine crew cuts and the big thug face and big steroid muscles and the big mustache, which I have to say the police in Toronto seem to love sporting the mustache. There's something about that Stalin-Hitler look, which, fascist men find so irresistible. So, yeah, hooked up with Dan Dix. I'd seen a lot of his work from Press for Truth online. He did some good work covering the kind of terror drills they were doing in Toronto before the G20. So he seemed like the natural person to hook up with. And luckily, it was fantastic. And it's just crazy that 2 hours after starting filming together, I get myself arrested by the Gestapo tactics. And very funnily enough, the police chief, the Toronto mayor, have all come out and admitted that the law under which I was arrested never was put into place. Excuse me. So I might even have the potential of suing the Toronto state for illegal incarceration and psychological trauma, if I wish to be so, creative with what I want to do. But no, Dan and I and his crew, we managed to cover the whole G20 riots and the kind of, well, riots. I say riots in inverted commas. We all know Black Bloc are not who they say they are. There's enough documented photo evidence of, they use the same boots, the same wooden truncheons as the police. And I saw with my own eyes, I couldn't get close enough to film it, but I saw with my own eyes the police retreat from a police car which had its window open, nice for the Black Bloc to set fire to. And I'm actually on I've just seen an article online just now from the Montreal Gazette, which shows that 80% of Ontario residents, of the ones they polled, believe the police did a good job. And I don't know where they found these 80% of people, but they can't be people who were witnessing the same event that I was, because what I saw was Toronto turned into a dystopian vision of the future, somewhere between The Matrix, Blade Runner, and Mad Max. It was insane to see that many police, who outnumbered the protesters 2-1. There was 19,000 riot cops to 10,000 protesters. I believe the mainstream media hype kept thousands of people away from Toronto because of fear. And the one thing, as we all know, that sells more than sex is fear. And they were all terrified to be there. And I'm not surprised, because I'm quite loud when I go out on the megaphone. And I had a kind of police camera team. All they were missing was a boom mic and maybe a sound engineer to follow me around. They had these $10,000 professional HD studio quality cameras that these riot police were carrying around, filming me and filming other people. And I was joking around with them, saying, look, I hope you put it on your police YouTube or your Facebook and tag me so I can see it. And no, they weren't so funny. But the good news behind all this, whilst we were making fun of the whole situation, a few of the police behind their plastic visor helmets did burst into laughter, did start smiling and smirking. So they're not all robot drone slaves. I think there are some human beings, but still, why are they taking part in something? If I was a Toronto police officer after seeing Toronto, what happened to it, I'd have thrown my badge and my gun down on my sheriff's desk and said, look, to hell with this job. I'm sorry, this is not what I signed up for. And you can stick the pension where the sun don't shine, because I didn't become a public servant to serve and protect in order to beat down teenage boys and girls with truncheons and fire tear gas into elderly ladies' faces. So it's yeah, sorry, this is just consciousness stream coming out now.
That's right, but as you mentioned in our conversation before you left, these cops are fed this steady diet of clips of violent protesters attacking cops and being trained that we're the enemy. So they get put into that position, and then they start enacting that, and the Black Bloc protesters come along and do their job, and then everything breaks out. And so we see how these things escalate, and I guess the question is, how could this have turned out differently? Is there any way that this could have turned out in any other way?